The impossible challenge. HFY Codex archives. The observation chamber of Station Arcturus hummed with the low murmur of a dozen different species, each speaking in their own tongue through universal translators. I am Kelver, Chief Medical Officer for the Interstellar Concordance, and in my 40 years of service, I had never witnessed anything quite like what was about to unfold. The announcement had come 3 weeks prior. Humanity was requesting admission to the Concordance's elite exploration corps. The EEC was legendary, composed of only the most physically resilient species in known space. The Dralix, whose crystalline bodies could withstand temperatures that would vaporize steel. The Urgith, massive beings whose redundant organ systems made them nearly impossible to kill. The Silthari, whose regenerative capabilities could regrow entire limbs in days. And now, humans wanted to join their ranks. The laughter had been immediate and widespread. Humans were fragile creatures, barely able to survive on worlds that deviated from their narrow environmental parameters. Their bodies were soft, easily damaged, and possessed no remarkable features whatsoever. They were adequate colonists, decent administrators, but elite explorers? The notion was absurd. Yet here we were, because the Concordance Charter demanded that any species be given the opportunity to attempt the trials. This is a waste of resources, growled Thex, the Urgith representative. His massive frame, easily 3 meters tall and half a ton of muscle and armored hide, dominated the viewing platform. Humans have already proven their worth in other areas. Why force them into roles they're biologically unsuited for? Because they asked. I replied, checking my medical scanner, and because the Charter doesn't discriminate based on perceived limitations. Perceived? Thex snorted. Their own medical data shows they're among the weakest species in Concordance. Single heart, linear digestive system, non-regenerating tissues, no environmental resistances. They're basically held together by optimism and those ridiculous beverages they're always consuming. Coffee, supplied Mira, my human medical assistant. She had been assigned to my staff 2 years ago and had proven herself competent, if occasionally confusing. And tea. We're like T2. Thex looked down at her, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. No offense intended to present company. None taken, Mira said cheerfully. You're not wrong about the biological specs. We are pretty fragile. Then why put your people through this? I asked, genuine curiosity overriding professional detachment. The trials have a 47% mortality rate, even among species adapted for extreme survival. Mira smiled, and something in that expression made my sensory tendrils twitch with unease. Because someone said we couldn't. Before I could process that disturbing response, the chamber lights dimmed and the observation screens activated. The trials were beginning. The first trial was temperature tolerance. The participant would be sealed in a chamber where temperatures would gradually increase from baseline to 400 Kelvin, then drop to 150 Kelvin. The test measured not just survival, but the ability to complete complex tasks while experiencing thermal extremes that would incapacitate most sentient life. The human candidate appeared on screen, and I reviewed her file. Commander Sarah Chun, age 34 standard years. Former military service in Earth's hostile environment divisions. Height, 1.7 meters. Weight, 68 kilograms. By Concordance standards, she was tiny. She wore the standard trial suit, a minimal protective layer that would prevent instant death, but offered no actual comfort. The chamber sealed behind her, and the temperature began to rise. Current temperature, 310 degrees, announced the automated system. Task 1, assemble the quantum relay. I watched Shin move to the workstation, where component parts lay scattered. Her movements were steady, precise. No signs of distress yet, though I could see perspiration beginning to form on her exposed skin. 330 degrees. The Dralix had typically completed this task in 8 minutes. The Urgith in 12. Chen's hands moved with practiced efficiency, connecting components, checking alignments. I noticed her breathing had changed, deeper and more controlled. 360 degrees. She's going to collapse, Dex predicted. Her cooling system can't handle this. But Chen didn't collapse. Her face was flush red, sweat now streaming down her temples, but her hands remained steady. She completed the relay assembly in 9 minutes, 40 seconds. Task complete. Beginning thermal reduction. The temperature plummeted. I watched the readouts as the chamber's atmosphere dropped below freezing, then far below. Chen's breath became visible, her skin rapidly paling. At 200 Kelvin, most humans would be experiencing hypothermia. At 150 degrees, they should be unconscious. Task 2, repair the life support junction. Chun moved, though I could see her limbs were stiff now, movement requiring visible effort. The task required fine motor control, threading filament-thin wires through connection points smaller than a grain of sand. Impossible with frozen fingers. Except Chen was doing it. Slowly, methodically, her hand shaking but somehow still precise. I leaned closer to my scanner, checking her biological readings. Her core temperature had dropped dangerously low, but her brain activity remained strong. Her metabolism had shifted, her body somehow generating heat from within, prioritizing vital functions. How is she still conscious? Mira murmured beside me. I don't know. I admitted, according to every medical text I've studied, she should be in shock. Chun completed the repair. The chamber doors opened, and she staggered out, immediately wrapped in thermal blankets by the medical team. But she was walking under her own power, and when she looked up at the observation cameras, she managed a weak thumbs-up gesture. Trial 1 complete. Survival rate, 100%. Thex said nothing, but I noticed his stance had shifted slightly, a subtle tell among his species indicating surprise. The second trial followed immediately. Physical endurance. The participant would run on a treadmill that would gradually increase speed and incline while atmospheric pressure decreased and gravity increased. Most species lasted between 40 and 90 minutes before their bodies gave out. Chen stepped onto the treadmill, still wrapped in emergency blankets, her color slowly returning to normal. She had been given 15 minutes to recover. Nowhere near enough. This is madness, I said. She needs at least an hour to restore thermal equilibrium. She waved the recovery period. Mira said quietly, she wants to continue. The treadmill activated. Chen began walking, then jogging as the speed increased. The atmospheric pressure began to drop, simulating high-altitude conditions. Thin air, less oxygen, every breath requiring more effort, gravity increasing to 1.5 standard. Chen's stride shortened, her body adapting to the increased weight. On the monitors, I could see her heart rate climbing, but it remained controlled, not panicked, determined. 2.0 standard gravity, atmospheric pressure equivalent to 8,000 meters. She was running now, truly running, under twice her normal body weight in air, so thin that most species would be gasping. Her breathing was labored but rhythmic. Sweat returned, soaking through her suit. 30 minutes passed. 45. At 1 hour, the Draelix representative leaned forward, her crystalline features reflecting confusion. Why hasn't she fallen? 90 minutes. Chen's pace had slowed, but she was still moving. Her legs should have been failing, her muscles depleted of energy. Her lungs should have been screaming for oxygen that wasn't there. She's going to die, Thex said, and for the first time, I heard concern in his voice rather than dismissal. But Chen didn't die. At 2 hours and 17 minutes, she finally slowed to a walk, then stopped. The treadmill powered down. She stood there, hands on her knees, chest heaving, and I was certain she would collapse. Instead, she straightened, looked directly at the observation camera, and spoke words that would echo through concordance for years to come. Is it all you've got? The chamber erupted in stunned silence. Chun walked out of the testing area under her own power, accepted water from the medical team, and requested the schedule for Trial 3. I looked at Mira, my human assistant, who was smiling with what I was beginning to recognize as pride. How? I demanded. By every medical standard, what she just did is impossible. Myra's smile widened. Maybe you're measuring the wrong things. Doctor, you're looking at our baseline capabilities and assuming that's all we have. But humans didn't evolve to be the strongest or the fastest. We evolved to keep going when everything else stops. We evolved to push past our limits. That's not evolution, I protested. That's psychological. Is there a difference? Mira asked. Our minds tell our bodies what they can do. And when everything says stop, humans have this really annoying habit of saying not yet. I turned back to the screens, where Chun was being examined by the medical team. Her readings were slowly returning to normal ranges, impossible as that seemed. In one day, she had completed 2 trials that typically required a week of recovery between them. There were 3 more trials to go: toxin resistance, pressure tolerance, and the final test, the Crucible, a 24-hour gauntlet combining every previous challenge simultaneously. The mortality rate for the Crucible was 73%, and Chun had just requested to begin Trial 3 immediately. Part 2, the price of determination. The 3rd trial began at dawn the next day. Chun had been given the night to recover, though I suspected she had spent most of it preparing mentally rather than resting. I had reviewed her biological scans a dozen times, searching for some hidden advantage, some genetic modification that would explain her performance. I found nothing. She was, by all measurable standards, an average human, which meant her achievements were not exceptional for her species. They were normal. That thought terrified me more than I cared to admit. Trial 3 was toxin resistance. The participant would be exposed to 15 different environmental toxins, each one capable of causing serious harm or death to unprotected organisms. The test wasn't about immunity. The trial suit would prevent lethal doses, but about maintaining cognitive and physical function while the body was under chemical assault. Chen entered the sealed chamber, which immediately began filling with the first toxin, sulfur dioxide at concentration levels that would cause respiratory distress in most species within seconds. Cognitive Test 1. Solve the navigation puzzle. On screen, I watched and approached a holographic display showing a complex 3-dimensional maze. The solution required spatial reasoning, memory, and mathematical calculation. Under normal conditions, participants completed it in approximately 5 minutes. Chen's eyes were already watering, her breathing becoming labored. The sulfur dioxide was doing its work, inflaming her respiratory tissues, making every breath painful. Yet her fingers moved steadily across the holographic interface, tracing paths, eliminating dead ends. For minutes, 52 seconds. Introducing Toxin 2, carbon monoxide. The colorless, odorless gas began mixing with the sulfur dioxide. Carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin more effectively than oxygen, essentially suffocating a victim from the inside while they continue breathing. Chen's oxygen saturation began to drop immediately. Cognitive Test 2. Recall and recite the security codes. 300 alphanumeric sequences that had been displayed for 30 seconds before the trial began. Most participants managed between 60 and 70% accuracy. Chen closed her eyes, swaying slightly, her lips moving as she recited. The computer registered each code. When she finished, the accuracy reading appeared 94%. Impossible, breathed the Siltari observer. The carbon monoxide should be affecting her neural function. It is, I confirmed, checking my scanners. Her oxygen saturation is down to 76%, but she's compensating somehow. Mira spoke up from beside me. Hypoxia training. Most human athletes practice performing under low oxygen conditions. The body learns to function with less. But this isn't low oxygen, I protested. This is active poisoning. Is there a difference? Mira asked again, echoing her previous question with the same unsettling smile. The toxins continued. Ammonia, chlorine, heavy metal particulates. Each one more devastating than the last. Chun completed every cognitive test, though her performance degraded with each one. By Toxin 12, she was on her knees, her hands trembling so badly she could barely interact with the holographic displays. But she never stopped, even when her body was clearly failing, even when every visible sign indicated she should be unconscious. She continued to push forward. Trial 3 complete. Survival rate, 100%. The chamber doors opened, and the medical team rushed in with oxygen masks and chemical neutralizers. Chun accepted the oxygen but waved away the gurney, insisting on walking to the medical bay. Thex approached me in the observation room, his massive frame somehow seeming less intimidating than before. "I need to know, Kelver," he said quietly. "Is this human exceptional, or is this what humans are?" I finished. I've been asking myself the same question. I pulled up the files of other human applicants who had attempted the trials over the past decade. Most had failed, but their failure points were revealing. They didn't collapse from physical inability. They collapsed from accumulated damage after pushing far beyond what should have been possible. One human had completed 4 trials before a pre-existing heart condition caused catastrophic failure. Another had made it through the entire sequence, but died 3 days later from complications. They didn't fail because they couldn't continue. They failed because their bodies literally broke from the effort. They don't stop, I said aloud. Even when they should, even when stopping is a logical choice, they don't. Trial 4 began that afternoon. Pressure tolerance. Chin would be placed in a chamber where atmospheric pressure would increase to crushing levels, simulating deep ocean or dense planetary atmospheres, then drop to near vacuum conditions. I had recommended a 48-hour recovery period. Chun had accepted 6 hours. The chamber sealed, and pressure began to increase. At 2 atmospheres, nitrogen narcosis typically began affecting cognitive function. At 3 atmospheres, most species experienced severe physiological distress. The trial would go to 6 atmospheres. Chin stood in the center of the chamber, her body already showing the strain. At 4 atmospheres, blood vessels in her eyes burst, creating crimson patterns across the whites. At 5 atmospheres, she began bleeding from her nose. But she continued performing the required tasks, assembling equipment, solving puzzles, maintaining basic motor function. Her organs are beginning to compress. I reported, my voice tight. Much more, and we'll see permanent damage. 6 atmospheres reached, beginning decompression. The pressure dropped rapidly. Too rapidly. I saw Chen's eyes widen as the physiological shift hit her. Gas dissolved in her bloodstream during high pressure was now expanding, forming bubbles in her tissues and blood. Decompression sickness. The bends, agonizingly painful and potentially fatal. Chun collapsed to her knees, her hands clutching at her joints where the pain would be most intense. Through the audio feed, I could hear her breathing, harsh and rapid but controlled. She was managing the pain, not surrendering to it. Task: reach the pressure valve and stabilize the system. It was a cruel test, requiring participant to move and perform delicate manipulation while experiencing pain that would paralyze most species. Chin began crawling toward the valve, each movement obviously agonizing. It should have taken 30 seconds to cross the chamber. It took her 4 minutes, but she reached it. With hands that shook from pain and nerve damage, she manipulated the valve, stabilizing the pressure at safe levels. The task complete, she slumped against the chamber wall, her eyes closed, her face a mask of suffering. Trial 4 complete. Survival rate, 100%. The medical team extracted her, and this time, Chin accepted the gurney. I personally supervised her treatment, administering hyperbaric oxygen therapy to eliminate the nitrogen bubbles and repair the tissue damage. Why? I asked her, as she lay in the medical bay, her body wrapped in treatment modules. You've proven your point. You've exceeded every expectation. You can withdraw honorably. Chin opened her eyes, meeting my gaze with an intensity that made my sensory tendrils retract reflexively. "No, I can't," she said, her voice rough but firm. Not because of honor or pride, or any of that. Because there are 1,000 humans waiting to find out if we can do this. Waiting to know if our limitations are real or just what we've been told they are. If I stop now, I'm telling them to stop too. But the crucible I began will be hell, Chin interrupted. I know. I've read the survival statistics. But someone has to be the first human to complete it. Might as well be me. The next day, I stood in the observation chamber with every senior member of the Concordance. Word had spread throughout the station. A human was attempting the complete trial sequence. The impossible was unfolding before our eyes. The crucible chamber was a nightmare of engineering. 24 hours of every previous trial combined and randomized. Extreme temperatures shifting unpredictably. Toxins introduced without warning. Pressure fluctuations. Physical endurance requirements that would break most species within the first hour. Chen entered the chamber. I noticed she had requested music, a strange human custom. Something about maintaining psychological stability through familiar stimuli. The request had been granted. The crucible began. For the first 6 hours, I documented everything with clinical precision. Chen's temperature regulation began failing at hour 2. Her oxygen saturation dropped below safe levels at hour 4. She experienced 3 separate incidents of decompression sickness by hour 6. She kept moving. At hour 12, I stopped taking notes and simply watched. This was beyond medical science, beyond biological possibility. Chen was no longer operating on physical capability. She was running on pure will, her mind somehow overriding every signal her body was sending telling her to stop. Hour 18. Chen was crawling now, unable to maintain upright posture. Blood from numerous small injuries stained her suit. Her hands were swollen from repeated pressure changes. Yet when a cognitive task appeared, she completed it. When a physical challenge manifested, she attempted it. "She's gonna die," Dex said, his voice hoarse. "Kelver, you have to stop this." I looked at my scans. He was right. Chen's body was failing. Multiple organ systems were operating at dangerously reduced capacity. But even as I moved to activate the emergency abort, Mira caught my arm. "Don't," she said quietly. "She knows what she's doing. She's dying." "Maybe," Mira agreed, "but she's also winning. And she'd never forgive you for taking that away from her." Hour 22. Chen wasn't crawling anymore. She was pulling herself forward using only her arms, her legs no longer responding to neural commands. The chamber temperature had dropped to near freezing while toxic gases filled the air and pressure crushed down from above. And still, she moved forward. Hour 23. Chun completed her final physical task, reaching a designated point in the chamber. She collapsed there, her body shutting down, but her eyes remained open, focused on the timer displayed on the chamber wall. The final hour ticked by. Chen didn't move. Her vitals were almost flatlined, but she was still conscious, somehow still aware. I watched her lips moving and realized she was counting down the last 60 seconds. 59, 58, 57. The entire observation chamber was silent. Hundreds of species, many of whom had initially dismissed humans as too fragile for serious consideration, now watched one small human refuse to die. 10, 9, 8. Chen's hand moved, just slightly, raising one finger in a gesture I would later learn meant victory among her people. 3, 2, 1. Trial complete. Survival rate, 100%. Congratulations, Commander Chun. You have passed all 5 trials of the Elite Exploration Corps. The chamber doors opened. The medical team rushed in, but Chun waved them back. With effort that looked like it might kill her, she stood, swaying, bleeding, barely conscious, but standing. She looked directly at the observation camera and spoke 2 words. "We're ready." Then she collapsed, and the medical team caught her before she hit the floor. Chin spent 2 weeks in medical recovery. I supervised personally, fascinated by her body's healing response. Humans, it turned out, had remarkable recovery capabilities when properly supported. Not regeneration like the Silthari, but a stubborn cellular repair process that refused to accept permanent damage. On the day of her discharge, I found her in the station's observation lounge, staring out at the stars. The Concordance Council has approved a full human division for the Elite Exploration Corps, I said, joining her. 500 positions to start. They're calling it the Endurance Division. Chin smiled, though I noticed she still moved carefully, her body not yet fully healed. Good. They'll need them. The galaxy is bigger than anyone knows, and it'll take the stubbornest species around to map it all. I reviewed your species' history. I continued. I had to understand. What I found. I paused, searching for words. Your species has survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, plagues that should have caused extinction. You've crossed oceans in wooden boats and climbed mountains that should have been impassable. Not because you had to, but because they were there. Yeah, Chin agreed. We're kind of crazy that way. It's not insanity, I said. It's optimization. Other species evolved to survive in their environments. Humans evolved to survive anywhere, regardless of conditions. You're not specialized for any particular challenge. You're generalized for all of them. That's a fancy way of saying we're too stubborn to know when we're beaten, Chin said with a laugh, then winced at the movement. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but in a galaxy full of species adapted for specific worlds, maybe the Concordance needs a species adapted for the impossible. I left her there, staring at the stars with that characteristic human expression. Equal parts determination and wonder. As I walked back to my medical bay, I passed a group of young human colonists, no more than adolescents, listening with rapt attention to news broadcasts about Chen's achievement. One of them looked up at me and asked, "Sir, do you think we could do that too? The trials." I looked at the young human, probably no more than 15 standard years old, already wondering if they could push themselves to the brink of death and beyond. "Yes," I said honestly, "I think you could, but the better question is, should you?" The young human considered this for a moment, then smiled. "Somebody has to find out what's out there. Might as well be us." And there it was, the essential human paradox. They were fragile, easily damaged, with no natural advantages in a galaxy full of species that outclassed them in every measurable category. But they had something else, something that couldn't be quantified on a biological scan or calculated in a medical assessment. They had the absolute, unshakable conviction that their limitations were just suggestions. As I returned to my duties, I found myself doing something I rarely did, looking forward to the future. Because if humans could do the impossible when the galaxy said they couldn't, what else might they achieve? The Endurance Division graduated its first class 3 months later. Commander Sarah Chun gave the commencement address, still moving with slight stiffness from her injuries, but standing tall nonetheless. "They'll tell you it's impossible," she told the assembled human graduates. "They'll show you the numbers, the biological assessments, the statistical probabilities that all say you should fail. Listen to them. Learn from them. Understand your limitations." She paused, and that characteristic human smile appeared. "And then do it anyway." The galaxy would never be the same. End of story. HFY Codex Archives, where humanity's determination knows no bounds.